Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Steve Rigby, the co-chair of Rigby Group and the owner of SCC, in the studio. How are we doing, Steve?
Nice to be here, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Now, Steve, I normally go through someone's LinkedIn profile when I pick out something to ask them, and I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and it's a long time ago, but you started at SCC when you were about 17. So
When I was 17, yeah, it was 1990, so 35 years this year, which is a very long time in life.
So I was going to sort of say, were you sort of unemployable at that time? Because how did you...
Yeah, I left school in a hurry, let's put it that way. So it was unplanned. Told my father he had 6 months. And 35 years later, here I am.
Was your journey to always work with your father, or did you have a grand plan to do something else?
Yeah, listen, I was a young man, and frankly, work at that stage of early life was less of a priority. But quickly into my journey in the family business, we set up a business called Byte Computer Superstores, which later sold to PC World, and that really set me on my professional journey. So that being involved in a startup from scratch was a really interesting phase of life, and really sort of engendered my work ethic and direction of travel. Ended up leading that business at a young age, and then we sold it in 1998. So tough business to be in, but amazing learning ground.
Was there any idea that you would go and do something else completely different, or was the goal always just to think, I'll actually probably go and work with Dad?
No, I mean, listen, I went on to found a number of other businesses outside of the group, which we bought back in. My father had some businesses outside of the group, as did I. We bought those all back in to form Rigby Group about 10 years ago. But it's nice to do things outside, but it's also a real strength to work as a coherent family. And obviously, as a family that's got some capital, it's much easier to build businesses, as you've experienced, from a capital base, than it is from nothing. So, I'm very proud of things like Rigby and Rigby, which are turning 20 this year, which is one of the businesses I founded, which is a real estate business now working all over the world. But nevertheless, what we have in Rigby Group really is an amazing success story. So very pleased to have been there for 35 of its 50 years.
I actually started work with my brother, and quite frankly, it was horrendous the first 2 years. It was absolutely horrendous, and he ended up going to do his own thing. Working with James, are you competitive with James? Was it competitive when you were young to try and potentially get the top job? Or
people ask me how you work with your family, and we found our way of doing it, but it does genuinely include 3 head offices. So mine's here in London, my brother's is in Birmingham, my father's is in Stratford. And what that does is just give a little bit of space. So, we found a way to give each other space. We never use a voting system. 2 out of 3 votes is good enough for us. So you're never always going to get unanimous. I am always amazed when I look at the EU and they have to get 28 countries to agree something. I mean, it seems ludicrous. So we take a pragmatic view. James and I are actually very complementary. So our skills are quite different. I'm more strategic, analytical, financial. He's more operational. So actually, we've always complemented each other. My father and I sometimes a little bit more competitive together. So we've got similar skills. But nevertheless, the benefit of a big business, it's allowed us to find our own place and our own hunting ground, if you like, to build our careers.
You've started, sold, been involved with a wide range of businesses, from tech resellers, IT distribution, hotels, real estate, airports, private equity. Which one has been your favourite to be involved in?
The technology business remains, our favourite sector to be in, no doubt about that. And I've been fortunate. We built a big distribution business in the early days of distribution. All of us ran it over the years. My father started it, then I ran it, then my brother ran it. I sold that in 2012. It was our first really big external transaction. We went on then to build Nubius, which we did in half the time with a third of the capital for the same return. That sold again in 2022. So the ability to kind of repeat exercises is really important, and that's the benefit of being in one industry. We're now again in distribution in Infinigate. So as a family, if you know how to do something, why not keep repeating doing it? So whilst we have a very diverse group, and we're very proud of some of the other businesses that we have, especially businesses like our airport business, which is now very material, above 20 million of EBITDA in its own right. We very much resonate around the technology business, and that's our primary focus.
And with such a diverse portfolio, how do you decide which industries or sectors to go into?
I think in reality, Mark, we because we formed the group from businesses we had outside, we probably went too diverse. and you'll see us in the coming years really pull ourselves back towards being principally a technology investor. For SCC, that means long-term ownership. So we see that as a multi-generational, 100-year business, hopefully. For the other businesses, it's more, if you like, transactional. They're businesses that we're buying and building, eventually will sell. And we're now, quite a prolific early-stage investor as well. So we really sit across the cycle: long-term investment, private equity-style investment, and venture capital.
You mentioned there about acquisitions, and they've been part of your journey. What's been the hardest thing about completing an acquisition?
Yeah, acquisitions are always hard. I've got one happening at the moment. They always surprise you, not often to the upside. And sales are even harder. So they are always a difficult process. I take great pride in buying somebody's life's work. So I generally, if I take the last 50 deals that we've done since about 2010, we've done about 100 in our total existence. But if I take the last 50 deals, which I've done all of, I take great pride in making the first phone call myself to the owner to make the approach. So I don't sit behind an advisor. And it's somebody's life work, so you should be really respectful of it. So I've always enjoyed that journey. They always take about 7 meetings. And I don't know why, but it's always about 4 at the start, gets into process, 3 at the end to get it closed. But it's really important to be respectful when you're buying somebody's business. I try and make sure I do that. And we've just sold our data centers to Pulsant. So I still remain very close on those type of activity. It's an important part of what we do.
When you look at an acquisition like that, do you have to buy into the owner to think, yeah, the technology could be great, the business could be great? Do you have to buy into the owner to think, yeah, I can work with you if you're going to do an acquisition?
I mean, generally we would do an earn-out period, so that owner is important. You're stuck with each other for 2 years, for good or bad. And we all know being in an unhappy marriage isn't necessarily the right place to be. So, you've got to really feel you can work with somebody. We're really clear. We set board principles right from day one, delegation of authority right from day one. So somebody knows how they need to act. And I think often people go into a new environment not expecting to know the rules, and they maybe have the wrong expectation of what those rules are. So we try and be really clear. I think we've got a recipe that works. We've not had too many bad ones in the last 15 years. There's a few, but not too many.
Steve, in your 35 years of being in business, lots of acquisitions, lots of success. What's been the single hardest decision that you've had to make in business so far?
I think whenever you're going through a difficult patch, so COVID was our last difficult patch, went from having monthly boards to weekly boards, unaware really at the time how much support the government would give, and they were very generous in furlough for organisations like ours. But when you go through those very difficult periods and you're talking about restructuring your business and losing people, those are always the most difficult phases. So these are people's livelihoods, their families, and when you're having to make meaningful decisions, as we did through COVID, fortunately we were able to furlough 2,000 people. Some of our businesses were closed, like airports and hotels. So without furlough, that would have been a really difficult period. But we did unfortunately have to let go of 500 people. So when you go through that, or the global financial crisis of 2008, actually those are the periods I've learned the most in business. But as I say, that when it's real for people, that's when it really matters the most.
Actually, it's an interesting point there, because it's been 50 years since your father, Sir Peter Rigby, founded SCC. So what would you say have been the pivotal moments that really define its success?
I think first of all, going into the PC business, and my father started in the same profession as you. So
did he?
Yep, specialist computer recruitment was the starting business, and actually 3i did a bit of a hostile takeover with the management, but it gave him some. He would have seen that as a loss. He hates to lose in life, but actually it gave capital to invest at the time in the very first chain of IBM stores that were selling XTs and ATs. So that was a really important moment. Not at the time for him, really. The distribution business kind of accidentally formed in the channel in the early 90s. And he grasped that. That was a really important moment. And then you go through, past that as an organisation. We acquired a big international business in early 2000s. We've had some of these large disposals, and the disposals have allowed us to become, this sort of behemoth that we are now as a group. So there's always a number. There's probably one a decade that's really material, but those early ones, those foundational changes, of going into what at the time was a fast-growing business. I remember in 1999 when the year 2000 change, happened, we grew 45% that year. We were already a big business, but we grew 45% in 1 year. And you look back at those moments in life and think, God, I mean, they're really quite meaningful changes. So there's lots along the way. Same, I'm sure, in your journey.
I knew I should have left recruitment. I should have gone into tech myself now on that journey. Apology, Dad. In your experience, what do you reckon the key factors are and contribute to the success and longevity of a family business? You've been in it 50 years with your father. What contributes to the success of that?
I don't know it's necessarily family. I think, a private business in ownership of an individual, a group of individuals, perhaps not in private equity, which is a different journey, which I respect. But in that situation, it's long-term determination. And if I look at why my father succeeded in an environment that was, pretty buoyant in the early 90s, it was because, frankly, he had his head down during that time where everybody else, was focused on fast cars and yachts. And my father kept his head down and worked really, really very hard through a buoyant period. And that allowed him to leapfrog beyond other people. So, the old adage around hard work and determination, I still feel today, is as relevant. You were in a business, you're in a sales business, so am I. I knock on doors still all of the time. So for much of the last 10 years, it's been on companies' doors to buy them. Much of my time these days is knocking on politicians' doors and, not being afraid to knock on a door and ask the question, ask for the order, still today sits with me as one of the most important things you have to do in life.
What keeps you motivated to do it, Steve, now? There'll be people listening thinking, if I was Steve, I wouldn't even work. Just go on a beach and just go and have drinks all day. What keeps you motivated to stay on that path and stay determined and focused?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky we have a very diverse business. So my job changes every few years in reality as we're trying to grow and do something new. So I think variety is really important. If it was just the same job, I think I'd struggle. So, but for me, I like mental Olympics. So I like learning new things. I'm early 50s now, but genuinely going through the biggest change of my professional career in terms of my understanding of business and how to approach things. So constant change, for me, reading's a really important part of that. But I think a combination of variety and just being a determined little so-and-so is... I get to the top of a mountain, I'm sure like you, I see another peak and say, okay, let's go again.
It's impressive, Steve. It's impressive. Now, I look at SCC and my opinion of them now is they're on a bit of a transformational journey. And what I mean by that is I look at them, and I might be wrong, but moving from maybe a traditional reseller to more a software and services business. Are you currently on that path? And if so, what challenges are there moving into more software and services?
Yeah, the channel, has got a number of challenges ahead of it, of which SCC shares those challenges. So clearly the world has moved to be software in orientation. That change is happening, in a SaaS environment. It's happening in a marketplace environment. The vendor mindset, especially those born in the cloud, is perhaps different than the historic ones. We've clearly had the transition to hyperscale. We've now got the transition to AI. So all of these things present opportunity and challenge in a business the size of SCC. It is a big business. It's 7,500 people. It's not as nimble perhaps as we'd like it to be in terms of the pace of its change. And we've also got some pretty brutal competitors here in the UK. So, Softcat and Bytes doing an amazing sales execution job. WWT, really doing very well right now. And perhaps CDW's, SEC and Computer Center actually probably is the service organizations with the most capability because they're perhaps dealing with larger customers. Perhaps that change is less easy for us to navigate. So, we are very determined to continue to transition the business and make sure that we're relevant. We've by far 2 times the market share as number 1 in France. I'm not proud that we've slipped to 5 here in the UK, and we want to get our position back up there. We used to be second in the UK. In Spain, we're in the top 10. So unfortunately, in life, size matters. And this is an ever consolidating channel. It's going to continue to consolidate. So SCC's job is to stay ahead of the curve and keep moving with our customers to make sure that we're addressing the key issues.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity in 2025 for SCC? Where are you going to be succeeding?
Our organisation, is immensely capable, and our job is to enable our sales force to present the business in the best possible light. And sometimes we hide behind our capability as an organisation. So new CMO has just started actually this year, which is good to see. And, I think SCC's really got to make sure that its market positioning and capability is fully understood because it does sit above a large amount of, there are very few organisations with our capability and the breadth of what we do. I mean, really quite deep capability in certain areas. We've just got to make sure we represent that better in the market.
And how do you do that? How do you articulate your capabilities to a new customer that maybe are aware of the brand, but they may be using Computer Centre or Softcat or Bytes? How do you articulate that message?
You know, the simple answer, unfortunately, still relates to sales. You know, if I look at Softcat, you know, who grew 18% last quarter, Bytes something similar. You know, Softcat now with over 1,000 salespeople. The old message of relationship management still absolutely matters. So, you know, we'd all love to think that, you know, the best marketing, you know, is the best marketing, but it still requires somebody to knock on a door, to coherently present a message, to ask for the business. And we need to keep doing that. We need to broaden what we do and our capability and reach in the sales force. So, you know, music to your ears as a recruiter, but the reality is, you know, the reason why some of the players are succeeding today is purely around sales execution.
And you'll continue to invest in sales. You think that's
it's critical.
The fundamental of the business?
Absolutely critical.
Let's move on to sort of strategy, Steve. What's the Rigby Group's approach to ESG, you know, across a diverse portfolio?
If I look at sort of the philanthropic side, first of all, one thing we're not is a box ticker. So, you know, I head up our foundation, the Rigby Foundation. It's now 35 years old. My father has a foundation, Sir Peter Rigby Charitable Trust. Collectively, we're pretty meaningful givers. So, you know, we focus on the West Midlands, but we're by far the largest philanthropic giver in that region. So, you know, we really try and make sure we give back into the communities that we were born from. So, my father moved from Liverpool. I was born in Birmingham, as was James. Importantly, SCC's headquartered there. So, we've chosen that as our place really to make sure that we focus on putting back into disadvantaged children aged between 11 and 25, and we're doing some really amazing things working with the local authorities and the combined authority. So for charitable wise, we think we're really ticking a lot of boxes, much more frankly than anybody else in the channel, because we're the only private business of scale left. When it comes to diversity, again, you won't be surprised that we're really quite rich and deep in what we're trying to do there. And despite the push in the US away from DE&I, we remain as a committed organisation. As a private company, we're trying to make sure we have exactly the same standards of a public company. So in terms of governance and structuring, you really probably won't find another private company with the same level that we have. So I think we tick a few boxes, if I'm being honest, on the ESG side.
With that philanthropic work that you do, what have you learned through that experience that has helped your business strategy?
I took over being the chair, actually, of the foundation a couple of years ago. I've treated it like a startup. More recently. So we spent about a year and a half reformatting what we do, meeting 30 charities, spending lots of time with the local authority, selecting schools to work with, assembling what's now called place-based giving strategy, and then we've just launched. So, but the way I went about it was exactly the way I'd start a company. And very few people do that. They forget how they got the money. But actually there's lots to do out there, but you can give money away in a haphazard way, or you can do it strategically to try and change lives, and that's what we're trying to do over a really clear period of about 4 or 5 years, assessing the outcomes each year. We're only trying to impact a small number of people, so probably the totality of a multi-million-pound per annum philanthropic campaign is to help about 2,000 people. So these are deep interventions to try and help young people change their course of life.
I noticed recently that you, your father and James appeared in the Sunday Times tax list at number 39. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, paying so much tax. I don't know if I'd see that as a proud thing to be in that list, but do you see that as a proud thing, giving back to the UK?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I fought to go in that list, honestly. We've never assembled our tax data before, but, you know, I think actually I believe in paying tax. I'm one of the strange people that do. You know, our society needs the infrastructure that we need. We can argue whether the expectations of the public are too great, which I probably would argue, but in reality we only succeed because we live in an ordered society. So I believe in paying tax. I'm very proud we're a top 50 taxpayer, and you know, I'm very proud we're a top 100 family giver. You know, I'm very proud we're a top 10 family business, top 500 global family business. These are not small things. So I add them all together. Yes, we're a wealthy family. Yes, we benefit from the business, but our give back into society, I think I feel proud that, you know, we do that well.
As chair, I think you're the chair now of family, or the incoming chair.
I started as chair yesterday, actually, of Family Business UK.
Great timing. Yeah. So as chair of Family Business UK, what initiatives are you championing to support family-owned businesses. Now, I know you've only been there in the job one day, but have you got initiatives that you're sort of planning?
Yeah, so I've been deputy chair since the summer of last year, so broadly leading the organisation since the summer, because there was a crisis with a change in inheritance tax. And again, all the lessons of my life I've deployed in that organisation. We did a capital raise from our members, which has really helped us. But in a 2-year period, we're going to double the size of the organisation in terms of people, its reach and capability, its revenues. I've transitioned it from being a membership organisation to being a policy and political organisation, as well as membership. So that journey we're well underway on. I just presented that yesterday to the outgoing board, and I've formed a new board who I talk to later this month. But we've got a big agenda to try and make sure that family and private businesses are represented by government, because in reality, the CBI does a great job for multinationals and for listed companies. The Federation of Small Business and the Chambers of Commerce do a really good job for small businesses. But for medium-sized businesses, perhaps those businesses of 25 or 30 million or greater, perhaps employing 50 people or more, there really isn't much support out there. So we're trying to make sure that we're that trade body.
Let's talk currently in 2025. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for VARs in general, not specifically SEC, but VARs in general, who are looking to grow, gain market share in 2025? Where can they make money, Steve?
It's always a difficult question, isn't it? Because it will depend on the organisation. And if I look at the data that we work with people like OC&C, in reality, the VAR channel is set to reduce in size. So the MSP channel is set to increase in size, and the marketplace channel is set to increase. So I think just staying as a pure VAR, just staying as a straight resale play, is probably an environment where, unless you plan to be consolidated, it's probably quite a difficult spot to be. So I think having an eye to how you build an annuitized income structure, an MSP-based business, I think is quite important. SEC's always been lucky to have a big 20% or so of its business that's annuitized. But thinking about how you can drive a long-term income structure that arrives at your doorstep at the start of every month, rather than fighting for a deal by deal each month, is important. So if I'm honest with you, I think just staying as a straight VAR is quite a dangerous place. I think you've really got to have a multifaceted business that's got lots of different income streams. That means picking new partners that perhaps are newer and perhaps work in a different way. And I don't think VARs spend enough time picking the winners. So I think those technological picks are really important. We've just worked with Canalis, to rethink our strategic software partners, our growth software partners, and those that perhaps are in incubation. So really starting to think about backing some winners.
Yeah.
And so that for us, we're a big organisation. We can look at things perhaps multifaceted, but I think picking technology winners and thinking about the transition away from just straight VAR is important.
Is there one company in the channel, and not SEC, but someone that you think will do really well in 2025? Who's the one to watch?
I mean, the one that is just kicking the doors down right now is WWT. I mean, their growth has been truly exceptional. They're clearly leveraging their US client base, US banking base here in London. But I also see them doing really good things around the AI hyperscale arena and the neocloud environment. So, the one that worries me the most is that organisation. They've tripled in size in about 2.5 years. So, and they're now over 2 billion in size. So you can't not notice people like that. I need to understand more about what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, because they've come under the radar a bit, haven't they? I look at that organisation, their marketing doesn't seem to be out there too much. They've suddenly not come from nowhere, but they've suddenly done really well the last few years.
Yeah,
why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is onboarding US clients, if I'm honest with you. I think we've always struggled with that worldwide business, because actually a smaller division, still wants the same level of service, still wants the same margin structure. And often it's difficult for you to deliver that. But I think from a US perspective, clearly that, almost every US business has a UK footprint. So they've clearly got that US-UK piece working well. They're now starting to spin that into other jurisdictions. So yeah, I think they're the one to watch out there. Recently,
we've seen the national insurance hikes this month. How does that affect a business of the scale of SEC? Lots of people are complaining, I've got a small business, 20 people.
Yeah.
You've got 7,500 or 6,500. How does it affect your decision making?
Listen, it's a punitive change, and I think had they increased 1.2% on national insurance and left it there, that would have probably been manageable. I think the change on the threshold, for a lot of businesses, not necessarily in the channel, but for a lot of lower margin businesses in, say, facilities management or retail or hospitality, has actually been really devastating. So, I think the government made a mistake. They should probably have looked at fuel duty or some of the other taxes that were available rather than just killing business. So £900 is the average change for a business. That excludes minimum wage hikes, which themselves were 6.5%. So I think the change for SEC or for the group overall was an average of £1,100. So, I've got nearly 5,000 UK people. So, do the math. It's pretty painful. I really fear for the smaller people that, are now facing concerns on employment rights bill, flexibility of working, cost of employing people. If you employ 5,000 people in the UK like we do, we can manage those things. But if you've got 20 people, then you start to think really hard about employing. So listen, these changes have only just come into effect this week, and we have to see what will happen. I saw this morning some data indicating that we're really at the lowest point for net new jobs out there. I think the government probably has taken a view that there's some tolerance for unemployment, if I'm being honest with you, and certainly at the lower end of skill sets that there is some tolerance. So we'll have to see what happens, but there's no doubt for business this has been a difficult phase, and whilst I had some hope when I last talked to you about where the government was going, unfortunately the relationship with business is quite low at this stage.
Just last week you were invited to Number 10 alongside 16 other businesses to discuss the economic tariffs. What's your take on the government's approach to this?
I'm very fortunate to have built some good relationships in government, hence being able to attend that meeting where the Prime Minister talked about the UK's response. And I have to say on this one, I think they're doing a really good job. I think generally on international measures, I think Starmer and the Number 10 team are really doing a very positive job. And we have a real chance off the back of this to be seen as a global leader. And I think they're taking a measured and controlled approach. That said, I'm also doing some work for the Combined Authority in the West Midlands on the tariff position there. And in the automotive sector, the tariffs haven't been reduced. They're still at 27.5%. They were already at 2.5%. So for certain sectors of the UK, we're in a really difficult spot. So this isn't over. I think I sent a message to one of my guys last night saying that I think Trump really has broken the train set, because I think there's going to be a global shift of confidence in US debt. That's going to impact all our economies. The dollar is deflating very quickly. Is reducing in value very quickly. That's tricky for the Europeans at a tricky time for them in terms of selling their goods into the US. They've got tariffs and now a currency position. It's going to drive inflation in the US. It might drive some deflation here. But I think the position that Donald Trump has unleashed is the largest act of economic self-harm we've ever seen.
Scary. And finally, my last question. What's your general outlook for the UK economy? Is it positive or negative? What's your feeling?
I'm always an optimist, and I believe there's always opportunity for everybody, even in the darkest of times. So that said, I think the reality is that we're in a low growth environment. The governments have suggested that we'll have a 1.75% growth rate next year. I think that's nigh on impossible. 1% this year. We had some positive data overnight on GDP. It was 0.5% month over month. I think 3 months over 3 months, it was a little less. It was about 0.4. So it's a positive sign. We had some growth in January. So we just have to take each month as it comes. But, for the channel, there is a lot of disruption happening in technology. And I believe that presents opportunities. So you'll certainly see our business continue to want to grow, diversify in terms of its technological footprint, continue to employ people, hopefully continue to pay some taxes, and do our part for the UK.
Steve, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.